Welcome back, everybody. Today we're discussing the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This is the newest MCU edition that has the undoubtedly daunting task of following WandaVision as it tries to justify its existence among the other MCU greats that have got us this far. The thing I like most about this first episode, and probably the series as a whole, is that it's very down to earth. Of course, these are two titled characters that don't have any real superhero power outside of a can-do attitude and 50 cc's of discount super soldier serum, but yeah, it's doing exactly what it needs to and pointing the lens at the people rather than the larger-than-life threats that, we've been inside of for some time now. I love the setting and I love the hinted drama that begins in this series. I think this was a great first episode with a few slow parts that I'm ultimately excited to see more about.
Was sollen wir machen?
The episode begins with Ironing Man giving us a peek at normality and him preparing to give the shield to the Smithsonian. Of course, this is a problem because Steve Rogers gave the shield to him, and as we see at the end of the episode, man, this was a terrible, terrible idea. Something that I want to point out is the price of the shield for someone that's dealing with financial troubles. If Vision's physical body was approximated at $3 billion, this must be just below $1 billion worth of vibranium. This is such a great marker of his character and who he is as a person, acting not for himself, but for what he believes to be morally right. We then see the contracts that he's working with the government, which should be paying him enough money to buy this boat outright because he's been there for 6 months, but he's done his service in the military. He's now an overseas contractor. He should be making bank, but maybe he's just a bad negotiator, which is a pretty realistic part of this story, I guess. I loved the action scene. I love seeing more of Red Wing, his trusty companion. I will say when they jumped out of the plane to get away from him, man, they just felt far too confident. This dude just flew into your plane with wings attached to his body. You're not getting away in wingsuits. The camera work during these scenes, also great. They mixed just the right amount of CGI with live actors jumping and using these wingsuits. High-octane action. It also reminded me of Independence Day, which, surely that's a positive. They rescued the captured soldier, and we come to Tunisia. Through dialogue, we're introduced to the group called the Flag Smashers, which is going to be very interesting how this story plays out. This point made me realize how drastically nationalism has changed across the MCU story. I think this is a massive point that's going to be covered in this series because it's literally discussing the legacy of the protector of America and how he ultimately was not aligned with American interests at the very end of his run. I think the Flag Smashers are likely going to get the morally gray bad guy treatment that somehow they can always justify their actions, and ultimately we may even be divided about our takes on them, and I think it'll be really interesting to see, how they align and what their main goal is. The soldier discusses how they believe that the world was better during the blip, which is interesting. Part of me views this as a soldier spitting out the same lines that his superior told him because that's the military, or that this group genuinely found some solace in a world being how Thanos felt it should be, which is also believable. Ask any virgin on the internet if Thanos did something wrong and you'll know exactly where this mindset comes from. Memes aside, you could make a tiny argument how the blipped world was better for a few different reasons, but from what we know about the MCU world as a whole, not many people view this as a positive thing. But of course, there is always that part of the spectrum. I think perhaps those that didn't lose somebody could have that mindset, or zealots that believe that their sacrifice was, for the betterment of the universe, like Thanos believed himself. Not saying it's impossible, but I think there is a very select few conditions that would allow people to subscribe to that idea. This feels very much like Anonymous, where the world didn't understand how to classify this group, so they just said what the news said, and he brings up this idea of a world without borders and how that might be the relatable thing that people could get behind. Years ago, this would have been a radical idea that likely wouldn't have been included because it was such a controversial topic. But again, I think this is showing the landscape of nationalism, how it's, evolving. It's okay to have pride in your country, but it's also okay to think that being prideful over stolen land isn't something that you want for yourself. I'm really excited to see where the Flag Smashers go ultimately because, I think there's a lot of ways they could write this group that isn't explicitly them being the bad guys. We then see Sam give the shield to the Smithsonian, and and give a really nice speech about how the shield belonged to Steve, and he wasn't ready for that mantle. If it wasn't obvious, the glass case and the glass opening to the world was showing us how unsecure this plan was from the very beginning. Instead of it being stolen and sold by thieves, it's stolen by the government, which, I mean, this is a government-sponsored museum, so it's, really not stolen, but ultimately it's used to rebrand a superhero that will once again be the protector of this country. Now, I have to believe that Rhodey is involved in this in some kind of way. War Machine's character was also one that was developed by the government to kind of show the world and be propaganda that we had strong protectors. Rhodey was once a force pushing for Tony to help in that regard, but his opinion has kind of changed in a similar way to how Captain America's opinion has changed, but nowhere near as radically. He is still very much Team America. He's still active military. It'll be really interesting to see if it's him that okayed the usage of the shield again, or if it was over his head as well, possibly with the Ross character here. This entire conversation by Rhodey is asking why he didn't take the mantle, how the world needs heroes, and how that they need a unifying force to get us all back to the good old days. For that reason, I think it is very likely that Rhodey had something to do with the later reveal, because of course he is Team America, and we need that figurehead, according to the government. We then see the flashback to the Winter Soldier killing targets and cleaning up this scene of witnesses. Now, the thing that I loved most about the first episode here was Bucky's story. My God, magic, all of it. He awakens from this nightmare sleeping on the floor. This is because, of course, beds are too soft.
Your bed is too soft. Lying in my bed and it's like
lying on a marshmallow. I feel like I'm gonna sink right to the floor.
This is showing us that Bucky, even if he wasn't fighting for the good side under his own free will, was a soldier and has the struggles that many soldiers still have. We then see him in therapy, which, bravo. Sadly, he has to lie to his therapist, fearing the repercussions of telling her the truth about murdering people in his dreams, which, I guess that makes sense. We learn that it's government-mandated therapy, which is a condition of his pardon, explaining why he isn't in jail for breaking the Sokovia Accords. This scene also acknowledges that he is once again considered a civilian of the country, which must have felt pretty good after being a tool of foreign powers for, so long. We learn that he is using 3 rules to cross names off of a list of people that he has directly affected as the Winter Soldier. I absolutely loved this concept, and it wasn't one that I was, really considering. As the scene plays out, it's made clear how much influence he had over American politics, and going after those remaining Hydra pawns is just such an excellent way to try and make amends for the harm that he's, legitimately caused. He doesn't exactly follow the rules, but seeing him say this,
I am no longer the Winter Soldier.
I am James Bucky Barnes,
and you're part of my efforts to make amends.
I loved it. Such an amazing way to introduce who he's trying to be and what he wants to do with the rest of his life, even, if he doesn't exactly know just yet. He has so much baggage, and seeing the emotional side of men in mainstream television, fuck yes. Feel those feels, get that help. She discusses how damning that silence of solitude can be, and how he needs to reach out to more than just her in order to change that, which I think will drastically shape this series and how the big Falcon and Winter Soldier team up is ultimately going to start, with him, coming together for probably a big bad, but him also needing Sam in his life for more than just the greater good. He needs that companionship, which, love it. He goes to have lunch with Mr. Nakajima, showing us once again that Bucky is living in Brooklyn. They enjoy their sushi together. We meet this perfect angel of an old man, which makes me wish I had an old man to eat sushi with. It also makes sense that he would befriend older people because he himself is, of course, over 100 years old. The joke about Pinochle is literally dating our beloved Winter Boy here. We then get a little more context to this relationship and the mind-blowing revelation that Bucky is still trying to cross a name off of the list. This person was the father of the boy that was executed by Bucky in his dream, and my God, what a great reveal. For me, the reveal wasn't too obvious, but of course, retrospectively, the hints were there. Bucky is just trying to be this good guy with this new life, and he has so much atoning to do. For that reason, Bucky's parts were my favorite part of the episode. Then, of course, we come to Louisiana. Sam Wilson and his sister are discussing selling the family boat and how she wants to sell because of their financial situation that is not great, and that Sam believes that they shouldn't because it's part of where they grew up. Now, here's the thing. I love the family dynamic here. I've seen so much discussion online about how this is meant to show systematic racism and the real-life struggle of Black America, and what it would look like if, this really happened and the blip really happened. And I think it does show a part of that. And I think maybe I would like more showing of this racism instead of, explicitly telling us that they're going through this. Just as we have racism now, I'm sure that we would have racism then. And if you want to argue that, if Sam was white, that he would have been approved, go for it. This is art, and it is literally up for that interpretation. Anyone that says otherwise just wants to prescribe the world their lens. But my immersion is completely guillotined by them trying to make us believe that Sam doesn't have money. He's working for the government, and he has been for 6 months as a known superhero. We know that the world saw the endgame fight because Monica brings up Captain Marvel and what she was specifically doing in that battle. These should be rock stars, and he said that there was an incredible amount of goodwill, hinting at Tony supporting them for the most part, which aligns, but this dude has done his own thing before and after being an Avenger that saved the entire planet. Nobody is endorsing him. Where the fuck is Nike? Forget representing America. Sign your soul to the sweet checks or stripes and save your family. America clearly doesn't care if this is how they're allowing their heroes to struggle, and I think that's kind of the point. That's the tie-in. And I think that is why I think the Flag Smashers might not be the straightforward, villain of this story, and how fighting for invisible lines of Earth just because that's what you're supposed to do may not be what this story is about. It may be why the mantle of Captain America doesn't need to be worn again. Steve Rogers went against the US government many times when he saw that it wasn't doing the right thing. And perhaps that's the lesson. We aren't always the good guys, and Captain America started as a propaganda to sell war bonds, and I think the US government is trying to get back to that, when the reality is that we don't need something protecting one group. We need something and someone protecting the entire world. I don't know how deep they'll go with this, because a good portion of America gets real shaky around new ideas in general, especially those that are benefiting a strong black man that plays video games with his boys, but, who knows. Back to old man Bucky, however, trying to get with this much younger woman to, sink her battleship. She makes a comment about his drinking ability, and he kind of laughs it off because, of course, he does have the super soldier serum, and he cannot get drunk.
I can't get drunk.
We then see him storm out, wanting to tell his friend the truth, and of course stopping at his front door, unable to say anything. Not wanting to ruin his night, not wanting to lose his friend, not wanting to cause more harm than he has already caused and, entered into the world. Then we get this line from Sam.
Oh, lined up perfectly. You always gotta do the most, huh?
You know I don't play with these white folks.
Which in the context of their kitchen, I don't know why, this made me literally cringe. This is the most awkward white people joke I think I've ever seen. And I don't know if it's his delivery or just, how this wasn't really set up. It was just it seemed real forced, and I don't know why.
You always gotta do the most, huh?
You know I don't play with these white folks.
Also, if you look back here, this is Old Bay, which kind of seems out of place for Louisiana, Cajun food, but perhaps Sam brought it from DC and is trying to make his family use that instead of Zatarans, but, who knows. We then see Switzerland and the Flag Smashers operation to steal money from the bank here. We do have a mention from Sam's sister that big business was, a real threat and ultimately why they couldn't get a loan, and Switzerland is likely still the place where fat cats store their money, so this might be a stealing from the rich situation instead of petty crime. We see the hexagon in the back, also confirming that Mephisto is a flag smasher. This badass jumps down, hands off the money, showing us how skilled this guerrilla operation is, even without funding, and the randomness of the people there being handed the masks beforehand in front of the bank shows how they thrive on anonymity and the chaos that, they use to accomplish their real tasks at hand. I do think it's odd that they gave them masks in front of the very bank that they plan to rob, which surely has cameras, but we also see this assumingly female character hand out the masks, and she is already covered up. So this is likely to give police targets that aren't genuinely there for the reasons that, they think that they were there for. While all of the main people stay covered and we never see their faces, I think these are meant to be the scapegoats and ultimately, people willing to fall on the sword for the greater good. Dude gets a friendly introduction to this man's boot, and we return to Sam at the bank, which I spoke about earlier, and how they're setting us up to show real racial issues in America. I genuinely hope they lean into this point and show us that Marvel isn't afraid of these topics, similar to Watchmen, and how they deconstruct these complex ideas instead of just saying it's racist because I'm black and that you would have likely acted differently if I was white. This feels like a very hard show don't tell lesson, where I think they could have benefited from including microaggressions into the banker's speech and make the audience uneasy about, how he's talking instead of just so happy-go-lucky. Similar again to Watchmen, when people that we think are good are saying good things ultimately, but then, they call the black-led play Black Oklahoma instead of just the play Oklahoma. This scene needed more nuance if they wanted the larger takeaway to be what I've described about the racial issues here. On my first watch, my mind wasn't on these big racial issues. It was about big business making it impossible for everybody, including superheroes, to make it in the world. And again, it had little to do with his skin color. From interviews with the showrunners, we know that the point of this part is letting us know that the show will be tackling these issues, and if you don't like it, suck a butt. Sam talks to Joaquin Torres, which is also hinting at this dude becoming the Falcon himself, but it could just be a red herring, although I kind of like this actor a lot. I really feel like he could pull it off. At the same time, I feel like they want us to believe that Sam will take the mantle of Captain America and let this dude become the Falcon, but I don't know. It seems too straightforward and too much like the comics for my liking. They discuss him getting stomped on, and he says this.
Wait, you don't think he could be a...
Look, I'll circle back to you.
Now, this, of course, was left open intentionally, and I would love to hear all of your thoughts about it. I'm thinking that he was going to say mutant or inhuman or superpowered individual or enhanced person. I think at some point we could see Sam get the super soldier serum, should it still exist in some capacity. This raw power felt like what Captain America could do if he wanted to take this aggression out to a normal human person. It would be really interesting to me if the government was once again manufacturing this stuff. If you think back, America needed soldiers, so they made super soldiers because Hitler was doing it, but really they did it because they could, and they turned them into propaganda. I think with the reveal at the end that we're about to talk about, we have the propaganda back in this story, and I have to believe that that super soldier serum isn't too far behind. Whether it's the US government, another country, or even a third party, I think the ethics of creating enhanced people is something that we're probably due to talk about. The episode ends with American politics crowning the new Captain America, and we are introduced to John Walker, also known as US Agent, also known as the new Captain America. Firstly, look at this dude. God, this hurts, but ultimately, that's the point. This is the imposter captain that will likely be unfit for this position and be closer to Captain America's original purpose than a fighter. Or he could be already on the super soldier route again and show the government is still doing this ethically gray practice outside of the public eye, like they did with Steve. It would be really interesting to see if AIM is somehow involved again as well, because their research into the human alterations that we saw in Iron Man. Either way, US Agent is an expected part of this story, and I can't wait to see where it goes. I hope that he is a prideful, arrogant jerk that steps up to Sam and/or Bucky and gets put in his place. But with that, we come to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed this. Please consider subscribing for more the Falcon and the Winter Soldier videos, breakdowns, and share with your friends to get this video noticed by YouTube, who hates me apparently. Special thank you to the highest tier supporter over on Patreon this month, Michael Linck. Much love, everybody, and I cannot wait to talk to you all again soon.